Light a fire in any wild place on Earth and watch what happens. Everything runs. The deer bolt, the birds scatter, the snakes pour out of the grass. The insects abandon a tree they have lived in their entire lives. Across 4 billion years of life on this planet, every single species arrived at the same simple rule about fire, and the rule is get away from it. And then, somewhere between 1 and 2 million years ago, one animal broke it. It walked towards the fire, it sat down beside it, and it stayed. That animal was us, and it is the strangest decision our species has ever made, and we are still doing it. Tonight, all over the world, people will deliberately light a fire and then sit around it in a circle, staring into the flames for hours, for no practical reason at all. Their houses are already heated. Their food is already cooked. They do it anyway. Meanwhile, there is not one other animal on this planet that will voluntarily sit down next to an open flame. Not one. So why is every animal afraid of fire, and why are we not? The answer is not that we are braver than they are. It is that fire did something to our bodies that it never did to theirs. And by the end of this video, you are going to understand that you personally cannot survive without it. There are 4 layers here. Let us go. First, take their side for a moment, because their fear is extremely reasonable. A wildfire is not a warm campfire. A serious grass fire moves faster than a human can sprint. It generates its own wind. It roars loudly enough that you cannot hear anything else coming. It throws burning material ahead of itself and starts new fires half a kilometer away. The heat arrives before the flame does, and the smoke arrives before the heat. For an animal that survives by reading its surroundings, a wildfire is the moment every one of its senses stops working at the same time. And it does not just kill directly. It erases the whole map an animal lives by. The scent trails are gone. The landmarks are gone. The burrow that was safe an hour ago is now an oven with one exit. A predator you can at least understand. It wants to eat you. It comes from somewhere, and when it is full, it stops. Fire wants nothing, comes from everywhere, and never stops until there is nothing left to take. Fearing it is not superstition. It is the single most rational calculation an animal ever makes. So a question for the comments before we get into it. Have you ever actually seen a wild animal near a fire? Not on television. In real life, a campfire that a fox circled at a distance, a bird that came in close to the smoke, a dog that would not settle. I want to know what it did because there is a specific list of animals that break this rule completely, and one of them does something with fire that scientists refuse to believe for about 100 years. Drop yours below, and then let us look at why the rest of them run. Here is what makes fire uniquely terrifying if you are an animal. Every other danger in nature has a shape. A predator has a body, a smell, a direction, a size you can judge. You can run around it, climb above it, or wait until it loses interest. Fire has none of that. It has no body. It comes from every direction at once. It is bigger than anything that has ever chased you, and it does not get tired. It does not lose the scent, and it cannot be intimidated. There is no behavior in an animal's entire repertoire that works on it. The only move available is distance. But I want to be careful here because the internet version of this story is that animals are born with a hardwired terror of flame, and that is not what the evidence shows. There is no fire gene. Animals raised away from fire will often approach it, investigate it, and get far too close. What they have is a general aversion to sudden heat, roaring noise, and heavy smoke, plus the ability to learn very fast from one bad experience. It is not programmed horror. It is caution, and it is the same caution that keeps them away from a cliff edge. And once you see it as caution instead of terror, the exceptions start appearing, because plenty of animals have worked out that a fire front is the best dinner service in nature. Everything small and edible is fleeing in a straight line out of the smoke. So the birds come, the kites gather, the falcons arrive, the storks walk in behind the flames to pick over what is left. Across Africa, Australia, and South America, birds of prey learn to hunt the edge of a fire, and they are not tolerating it nervously. They are waiting for it, the way a fisherman waits for a boat to come in. Then there is the one that sounds like folklore, and is not. In northern Australia, black kites, whistling kites, and brown falcons have been seen picking up burning sticks from the edge of a fire, carrying them in their beaks or their talons, and dropping them into dry grass that is not caught yet. It spreads the fire, it panics more prey out of the new patch, and the birds eat. Aboriginal Australians had been describing this for generations, and it took until a 2017 study for it to be written down properly in the scientific literature. So we are not actually the only species on Earth that uses fire. We are just the only one that can make it, and one animal actively hunts fire itself. There is a family of jewel beetles with infrared sensors built into pits on their bodies. tuned to detect the heat signature of a forest fire from a considerable distance. When one starts, they fly towards it. They arrive at ground that is still smoking and lay their eggs in the freshly burned wood because the trees are dead, and every insect that would normally compete with their larvae has either run away or been cremated. To that beetle, the most feared force in nature is a maternity ward. So fire is not some universal magic terror after all. It is a serious hazard that most animals sensibly avoid, and a small number have learned to exploit. Which means the interesting question was never why they run away. Almost everything runs away from a thing that can kill it. The interesting question is the other one. Why did one skinny, slow, thin-skinned ape do the opposite, and what did it cost? Because it did cost something, and we are still paying it today. Here is the reveal. We did not tame fire so much as fire rebuilt us. Once our ancestors began cooking, food became dramatically easier to chew and to digest, and evolution did what evolution always does with an expense it no longer needs to pay. Our jaw muscles shrank. Our teeth shrank. Our guts shortened because a shorter gut is enough when the food arrives pre-softened, and the enormous energy saving went somewhere else into the most expensive organ in the body. Cooking did not just feed the human brain, it paid for it. Think about what cooking actually is. It is digestion that happens outside the body before the food ever reaches your mouth. Heat breaks down the tough fibers and unfolds the proteins that your stomach would otherwise have to fight through, so a cooked meal gives up far more of its energy than the same meal raw, and it gives it up for almost no effort. A gorilla has to eat for most of its waking life and carry a huge fermenting gut to survive on raw leaves. We got to close that factory down and spend the savings on thinking. If that changes how you think about a cooked meal, subscribe, because this whole channel is about the places where being weak turned out to be the reason we won. And stay with me, because the proof of this is not in a fossil. It is in modern people who tried to go back. Because you can test this. Modern humans who commit to a strictly raw diet with all the advantages of a supermarket, blenders, imported fruit, and year-round supply still tend to lose body weight steadily, and a large proportion of the women on long-term raw diets stop menstruating altogether. Their bodies quietly conclude that this is not a good year to have a baby, and these are people with access to food our ancestors could not have dreamed of. Take away the cooking, and our species cannot reliably reproduce. That is not a preference. That is a dependency. So the second question, and I think this one is genuinely uncomfortable. If you had to survive 1 month in a forest with no matches, no lighter, and no way to start a fire, how long do you honestly think you would last? Not how long you would like to last. Honestly. Put a number in the comments, and then remember that every single one of your ancestors solved that problem, or you would not be here to answer it. The archaeology is patchy, because fire leaves an awkward kind of evidence, but the trail is there. Burnt bone and ash inside Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, 1,000,000 years old, deep enough inside that lightning could not have put it there. Clusters of burnt flint and seeds at a site in Israel from around 800,000 years ago, in the same spot again and again, which is what a hearth looks like. And from roughly 400,000 years ago, proper fireplaces, used repeatedly in the center of the living space. Not a lucky fire, a kept one. And that word, kept, is the whole argument. A single burnt patch could be lightning, but the same spot, blackened over and over, ringed with the cracked bones of cooked meals, sitting in the middle of where people slept, is not an accident that kept happening. It is a decision that kept being made. Somebody chose that place, and somebody kept the fire in it alive long enough to leave a stain we can still read 100,000 years later. And you are carrying the result of that in your face right now. Compare your jaw to a chimpanzee's. A chimpanzee spends around 6 hours a day chewing, has muscles that run right up the side of its skull to anchor that bite, and teeth built for grinding raw plant matter into pulp. You spend perhaps half an hour a day chewing food that has been softened for you by heat. Your bite is feeble, your teeth are small, your jaw is so reduced that a third of you cannot even fit your own wisdom teeth into it. That is a body that has outsourced its digestion to a fire. Fire also solved a problem that had nothing to do with food. Every ape sleeps up in the trees, and they do it for one obvious reason. The ground at night belongs to something else. Our ancestors came down out of the branches and started sleeping on open ground, which should have been suicide, and the thing that made it survivable was a circle of flame and somebody awake to feed it. Fire is the reason we could lie down, unconscious, for 8 hours in the middle of a continent full of animals that eat primates. And it did something subtler than that. It extended the day. Every other animal on the savannah has its life cut in half by darkness and simply stops. Fire handed us 4 or 5 extra hours that no other species has ever had, and those hours were useless for hunting or gathering because you cannot see beyond the light. They were only good for one thing: sitting together and talking. There is a lovely study on this, done with hunter-gatherer communities, comparing what people talk about in daylight with what they talk about at night around a fire. In the daytime, the conversation is practical and often sharp: work, arrangements, complaints, gossip about who is behaving badly. After dark in the firelight, the subject changes almost completely. Around 4/5 of it becomes stories. The dead, the spirits, the ancestors, the funny thing that happened to somebody 2 valleys away. Fire did not just cook our food, it invented the audience. And that matters more than it sounds, because a story is how a group remembers something none of its living members saw. Around that fire, an old woman could hand down where the water is in a drought that comes once a lifetime, or how a great-grandfather survived a flood, or a rule about which strangers can be trusted. Daytime keeps you alive today. Firelight is where a culture is actually assembled, night after night, one story at a time, until a group of apes is carrying more knowledge than any single one of them could ever hold. And there is one more thing it did, which is the reason this episode belongs on this channel. It made us frightening. A hunting cat that has spent its whole life at the top of the food chain will not walk into a circle of firelight. The lion turns away. The hyena circles and keeps its distance. The leopard, which can carry an antelope up a tree, simply will not approach the flame. So a species with no claws, no speed, and no armor became, after dark, completely untouchable. Not because we got stronger, because we were holding the one thing that everything else on the continent had spent countless generations learning to run from. Think about the reversal in that. For most of our history, we were prey. We were slow, soft meat that any big cat could take. And at night, when we could not see them coming, we should have been at our most helpless. Instead, night became the safest part of our day, because the predators had handed us a weapon they could never pick up themselves. And our closest relatives are further along this road than people realize. In Senegal, researchers watching savanna chimpanzees during the annual burning season found that they do not panic at wildfire. They watch it. They move calmly, they judge which way it is going, and they reposition themselves ahead of it without any of the terror you see in other animals. They cannot start a fire and they cannot keep one alive, but they can read one, which suggests the composure came first and the control came later. And those really are 2 separate skills. Keeping a fire alive is not difficult once you understand it, and you can start by simply taking a burning branch from a lightning strike or a grass fire and refusing to let it die. That is almost certainly how it began, and it may have gone on for hundreds of thousands of years that way. Making fire from nothing, from friction or from a spark, is a completely different problem. And it is the moment we stop depending on the weather for the most important thing we owned, which means that for a very long stretch of our history, the single most valuable object any group of humans possessed was a small pile of burning wood that had to be carried, protected from rain, fed all night, and never, under any circumstances, allowed to go out. Somebody had that job. There are human societies recorded well into modern times who carried smoldering embers in a horn or a clay pot for weeks while traveling. Losing the fire was not an inconvenience. It was a catastrophe you might not survive. So here is the debate for the comments, because researchers genuinely argue about this one. Team Cooking says the calories are the whole story, that fire fed the brain and everything else is a side effect. Team Protection says the food matters less than the fact that fire let us sleep on the ground and stopped things eating us at night, cooking or protection. Pick one and defend it below. And every single thing we have built since came out of that same flame. Look at what needs heat. The metal in your pocket had to be smelted. The glass in your window had to be melted. The bricks in your walls had to be fired. The steam that powered the first factories was boiled. The electricity running this video, for most of the world, is still made by burning something to spin a turbine. Every technology we have is downstream of a hominin deciding not to run away. It has never been free either. Smoke inside a shelter is genuinely dangerous, and cooking over open fires indoors still contributes to millions of deaths a year from lung disease, overwhelmingly among women and small children in poorer countries. Burns are one of the oldest injuries in the human record, and the same tool we use to clear land has repeatedly escaped us and taken the settlement with it. We are the only animal that has to manage a predator it deliberately keeps inside the house. And here's the part that gives the whole thing away. We do not need it anymore, and we will not put it down. Campfires get lit by people with perfectly good tents and gas stoves. Candles get sold by the million to people with electric lighting in every room. Fireplaces get installed in centrally heated houses at enormous cost, purely to have something to look at. We have kept the flame long after the practical reason for keeping it disappeared. And it measurably does something to us. In controlled studies, sitting in front of a fire with the flicker and the crackle produces a small but consistent drop in blood pressure, and the effect gets stronger the longer people sit there and the more social the setting is. Think about how strange that is. The one thing that sends every other animal on Earth into a full panic is the thing that our nervous system reads as safety. Our bodies have the response backwards, and it is backwards on purpose, which finishes a pattern we keep running into on this channel. The orca does not kill you because it decided not to. The mosquito kills more of us than every predator combined because it is too small to fight. The polar bear hunts you because you look like food. In every one of those stories, our strength was never the point. And here it is again, in its cleanest form. The weakest large primate on the savannah won the continent by picking up the one thing nothing else would touch. So here's the twist. Every animal is afraid of fire because fire behaves exactly like a predator. It is fast, it is hungry, it grows while it feeds, and it cannot be reasoned with. Their fear is correct. Ours would have been correct too. What our ancestors did was not conquer that fear, it was something much odder. They walked up to the most dangerous force in their world and adopted it. We took a predator into the camp. We fed it every night. We carried it when we moved, and in return it fed us, guarded us, and slowly rebuilt our bodies until we could not live without it. And nothing else has ever done it. Not in 4 billion years. There have been animals smarter than us in specific ways, animals with better memories, better senses, better teamwork. Fire has been burning on this planet since land plants first gave it something to burn, 400 million years or so, and every creature that ever lived took one look at it and made the sensible decision. Exactly one lineage made the other one. So the next time you find yourself sitting in front of a fire, staring into it, not talking, just watching it move, notice that you are not bored, and you are not frightened, and you cannot quite look away. That is not a habit you picked up. That is a million years of your ancestors doing the exact same thing every night, because the alternative was the dark. Every person you are descended from, without a single exception, sat in front of a fire and watched it exactly the way you are about to. It is the one unbroken thread that runs all the way back down your family tree to the first hominin who refused to run. You are looking at the oldest thing your species owns. Tell me your team, cooking or protection, and tell me how long you would really last in that forest without a lighter. If you made it this far, hit like and subscribe, because there is one more part of this story. Every animal stayed away from our fires. Every animal except one. Something kept coming back to the edge of the light, night after night, close enough to watch us, but never close enough to touch. It was a predator that hunted in packs and could have taken any of us. And instead of us killing it, or it killing us, something completely different happened. Why did the wolf walk into our camp? That is the next video. I will see you there. There is an animal asleep in millions of homes tonight, on sofas and beds, next to children, and it is a wolf. We have spent 100,000 years being terrified of wolves. We hunted them out of entire countries. We put them in every story we tell children about the dark. And yet at some point in the deep past, out on the edge of a campfire, one of them stopped running. Every other animal on Earth backed away from our fire. We covered that last time. This one walked towards it, and that single decision produced the most successful large carnivore in the history of this planet, and it is currently lying on somebody's kitchen floor waiting for dinner. And I want you to feel how strange that is, because it is not a small thing. A wolf pack is one of the most effective hunting units that has ever existed. They run down animals many times their size. They coordinate. They do not need us for anything. And we were not gentle with them either. We killed wolves on sight for most of our history and wiped them out of Britain, of most of Europe, of most of the United States. So this was not a friendship between equals who liked each other. Two apex predators who spent thousands of years at war somehow ended up sharing a bed. So why did the wolf walk into our camp? There are 4 layers to this, and the last one changed the animal's face. Let us go. Start with where it ended up, because the scoreboard is absurd. There are somewhere around 300,000 wolves left in the wild, scattered across the whole northern hemisphere, and most of them are managed, monitored, or protected. And there are roughly 1 billion dogs. 1 billion. Dogs live on every continent, including Antarctica, in numbers no wild predator has ever come close to. Measured the way evolution measures things, which is simply how many copies of you exist, the wolves that walked towards the fire beat the wolves that stayed away by more than 3,000 to 1. So before we go further, a question, and I want the comments to fight about this one. Do you think your dog actually loves you, or does it love the fact that you have hands in a fridge? Be honest, because there is real science on both sides of that, and I'm going to show you a brain scan later that makes it very hard to be cynical about it. Tell me which camp you are in now before you hear the evidence, and then tell me if it changed. And if you have a cat, hold on, because your animal did something completely different, and that is the next video. First, the animal we are talking about. A gray wolf is around 40 kilos of muscle with a bite roughly twice as strong as a large dog's, built to run for hours and bring down elk and bison in a coordinated group. It lives in a family unit, it raises pups cooperatively, and it communicates constantly. That last part matters more than anything else in this video. Our ancestors did not adopt a solitary killer. They adopted a social animal that already understood families, ranks, shared food, and teamwork. The wolf came pre-installed with almost everything you need to live in a human group. And that is not a small coincidence, it is probably the whole reason this worked. A leopard is a magnificent predator, and it will never live with you, because a leopard has no concept of a group that eats together, defers to somebody, and raises young cooperatively. The wolf already ran its entire life on those rules. All that had to change was which family it belonged to. Now think about what a human camp smelled like 30,000 years ago. We were successful hunters by then, and successful hunters make an enormous amount of waste. There were bones everywhere. There were scraps of meat nobody wanted. There was marrow left in cracked joints. There were guts pulled out and thrown aside. To a hungry wolf in a hard winter, a human camp was not a threat. It was a rubbish heap that never ran out, warm and lit all night. All you had to do to eat from it was one thing that every instinct in your body screamed against: get close to the humans, and most of them could not do it. That is the whole story right there, and it is worth sitting with. Every wolf in that forest wanted the food, but a wolf has a flight distance, an invisible line it will not let a human cross, and in a normal, healthy wolf, that line is enormous. The bold ones came in and got speared. The nervous ones stayed in the trees and stayed hungry. But somewhere in that population, by pure genetic accident, there were a few animals whose fear line sat just a little closer in. Not tame, not friendly. Just slightly less terrified than their brothers and sisters. And that tiny difference is worth putting a number on, because it is the entire mechanism. Say the average wolf will not come within 100 meters of a camp, and a rare one will come within 80. In a good year, that difference is worth nothing at all. But in a hard winter, when the deer have gone and the snow is deep and everything in that forest is starving, the animal that can eat from the edge of a human camp lives, and the animal that cannot does not. Winter after winter, that filter runs, and it only ever rewards the same direction. And this is where almost everybody tells the story wrong. The version we all grew up with is that some clever hunter took a wolf cub home, raised it by hand, and tamed it, and that hunter gets to be the hero of the story. It is a lovely image. It is also almost certainly not what happened, and we can actually demonstrate that it does not work, because people have tried it many times under controlled conditions, and the results are extremely clear. Think about the practical side of it for a second. You are a hunter-gatherer with a hard, hungry life. You are going to walk up to a wolf den, get past the adults, steal a cub, and then spend 2 years feeding meat you cannot spare to a predator that will grow up strong enough to kill your children, on the hope that it turns out friendly. And then you are going to do that again and again for thousands of years and somehow end up with a whole new species. It does not hold together. The question is not how we tamed the wolf. The question is who was doing the choosing. Here is the answer. We did not domesticate the wolf. The wolf domesticated itself. Nobody chose anything, at least not at first. The rubbish heap did the choosing. The slightly calmer animals could eat a little closer, so they were better fed, so they raised more pups, and those pups inherited the calmness. Repeat that for a few hundred generations and you are not selecting for hunting or strength or speed anymore. You are selecting for one single trait over and over, the ability to be near a human without panicking. Our waste was the filter and tameness was the only thing that got through it. And notice what that means. Nobody in that story has a plan. There is no clever hunter, no first friendship, no moment anybody alive would have noticed at the time. There is just a pile of bones outside a camp, quietly rewarding the same trait every winter for longer than our species has had farming. The dog was not invented. It settled out of the conditions, the way frost forms on a window, because the same thing kept being true for long enough. And if you think that sounds like a neat theory that nobody could ever test, stay exactly where you are, because a Soviet geneticist tested it on foxes, and the result is one of the strangest experiments in the history of biology. Subscribe, because this next part is the reason this video exists. In 1959, a scientist called Dmitry Belyaev started breeding silver foxes on a fur farm in Siberia, and he selected for exactly one thing: not color, not size, not intelligence, Just how close a fox would let a human get without snapping. Nothing else. Within a few dozen generations, he had foxes that ran to people, whined for attention, and licked hands. But that is not the famous part. The famous part is what came with it, free, that nobody selected for at all. The ears went floppy. The tails started to curl. The coats came out in patches of white. The faces got shorter and rounder and more puppy-like. He was breeding for friendliness and getting a dog anyway. The leading explanation for that is beautiful and slightly unnerving. Very early in an embryo, there's a bundle of cells called the neural crest, and it migrates outwards to build a surprising list of things. Parts of the adrenal glands that drive fear responses, and also cartilage and pigment cells, and parts of the jaw. So if you select for animals with a milder fear response, you are quietly selecting for slightly fewer of those cells. And fewer of those cells means softer ears, patchy color, a shorter snout. Floppy ears are not cute by design. They are a visible side effect of an animal that is less afraid of you. Which gives me my second question for the comments, and I genuinely want to know. Look at your dog, or the last dog you saw. Floppy ears, curly tail, white patch on the chest, because every one of those is a receipt. It is physical evidence of 100 generations of ancestors that were selected for being unafraid, and the shape of the animal in your house is the leftover signature of that. Tell me what your dog has got. Now, I have to be straight with you about what we do not know, because this field argues constantly. We do not know when this happened. The genetic estimates run anywhere from about 15,000 to 40,000 years ago, which is an enormous range. We do not know where. Europe, Siberia, and East Asia have all been argued for, with real evidence. We do not even know if it happened once or several times independently. And here's the strangest part. The exact population of wolves that dogs came from appears to be extinct. Dogs are not descended from the wolves alive today. They are cousins, not children. What we do have are moments, and some of them are hard to read without feeling something. In Germany, there is a grave from about 14,000 years ago where a man and a woman were buried with a puppy. That puppy had been seriously ill for weeks with a disease it could not have survived without somebody keeping it warm, giving it water, and cleaning up after it. It was of no use to anybody. It could not hunt. It could not guard. Somebody nursed a dying animal for weeks anyway, and then buried it with their own dead. That is not livestock. That is not a tool. 14,000 years ago, somebody loved a dog, and that grave is not alone. In Israel, there is an older burial where a human hand was placed resting on a puppy. In Siberia, there are dogs buried carefully, laid out on their sides, in the same ground in the same manner as the people around them. Long before anybody wrote anything down, we were treating this animal as somebody rather than something, and we have been doing it for as long as we have been burying our own. And the partnership itself was extraordinarily good business for both sides. Look at what the dog gave us. Hunting, because a nose that is tens of thousands of times better than ours turns a lost trail into a found one. Guarding, because nothing gets near a sleeping camp without the dog knowing first. Herding, which is a wolf stalk and chase sequence with the kill switched off, and which made keeping large animals possible at all. Hauling, on sleds across country that would have stopped us dead. And warmth on the freezing nights, which is not a joke, it is a real survival margin. We did not get a pet. We got a sensory system, an alarm, an engine, and a heater. Every one of those is a job we would otherwise have had to do ourselves, badly, with a body that is worse at all of them. And the wolf got something even better, though it never knew it was making the trade. It got food it did not have to catch, and that is the hardest problem in a predator's life solved permanently. It got protection from other predators and from human hunters. It got shelter, warmth, and veterinary care, and eventually it got an entire species that would go to work every day to buy it dinner. The wolf outsourced survival to us, exactly the way we outsource digestion to fire. But food alone does not explain what happened next, because dogs did not just get tamer. They developed an ability that no other animal on Earth has to this degree. Point at something. Any dog, even a puppy that has never been trained, will look where you are pointing. That sounds trivial until you learn that chimpanzees, who are far more intelligent and share far more of our DNA, are bad at it. Wolves raised by humans from birth are bad at it. Somewhere in the last few thousand generations, dogs evolved to read human gestures, and they read us better than our closest relatives do. And then there is the detail that gets me every single time. Dogs have a small muscle above the eyes that raises the inner eyebrow and makes that pleading, wide-eyed expression that you cannot say no to. Wolves do not have that muscle. It appeared in dogs, and only in dogs, and the reason it spread is that humans could not resist it. Studies in shelters found that the dogs who pulled that face more often got rehomed faster. We selected for it without knowing we were selecting for anything at all. That animal grew a muscle in its face specifically to talk to us. And when researchers trained dogs to lie still in an MRI scanner, awake and unrestrained, and showed them the smell of their owner, the reward center of the dog's brain lit up more strongly for the smell of their person than for the smell of food. When you look into your dog's eyes and it looks back, both of you release oxytocin, the same hormone loop that runs between a parent and an infant. That loop does not exist between a human and a wolf. It is not projection, and it is not us flattering ourselves. It is a bonding mechanism that evolution built between two different species, which is a genuinely rare thing on this planet. And it runs in both directions, which is the part people underestimate. Your dog is not simply enjoying your company. It has been shaped over tens of thousands of years to plug straight into machinery in your brain that was built for looking after children, which is why losing one hurts the way it does, and why people who would never call themselves sentimental fall apart over it. You are not being soft about an animal. You are running a parental attachment circuit that a predator learned how to press. Now the objection you should be having. If it is really about growing up with humans, take a wolf cub and raise it exactly like a puppy. People have done this properly, in research settings, bottle-feeding cubs around the clock from days old. And what you get is a wolf. An affectionate wolf, sometimes, but one that does not follow your point, does not look to your face for help when a problem gets hard, and becomes genuinely dangerous at sexual maturity. A dog puppy that has had a fraction of that attention will outperform it on every human reading task by a wide margin. Upbringing is not what separates them, genes are. And that is why almost nothing else made this jump, even though plenty of animals had exactly the same opportunity at exactly the same rubbish heaps. The hyena is intelligent, highly social, and lives in clans, and it never became a pet. The jackal scavenged alongside us for just as long and stayed wild. The fox is right there in our cities eating our bins today and has not moved in with us. The bear was fed by humans for centuries and never became anything but dangerous. Proximity was never enough. Something about the wolf specifically was compatible with us, and nobody else on that list had it. There is even a case of the deal being cancelled. Dingoes are descended from domesticated dogs that came to Australia thousands of years ago and then walked back out into the desert and went feral. Given a continent with plenty of food and no need for us, they simply left, and they have been living as wild predators ever since, which tells you this was never magic and never permanent. It was a bargain, and if the terms stop being worth it, the animal can walk away. So here's the debate, and it is a real one among people who study this. Team The Wolf Chose Us says the animal walked in on its own, and we were passive. We were basically a food source that happened to be warm. Team We Chose It says that once those first calm wolves were around, humans absolutely started picking favorites, feeding the good ones and killing the ones that growled at the children, and that is real selection. Wolf chose or we chose. Pick one and defend it below. And I should be honest about what the deal cost the animal, because it was not free. A dog's brain is around 25% smaller than a wolf's of the same body size, because a lot of the expensive machinery for surviving alone is no longer paid for. Dogs cannot reliably survive without us, and street dogs live short, hard lives. And then, in the last 200 years, we did something the first 10,000 years never did. We started breeding for looks and gave a lot of dogs skulls that cannot breathe properly, hips that fail, and spines that collapse. The wolf made a fair bargain with our ancestors. The last chapter of it we wrote badly, which lands on the pattern this whole series keeps circling. The orca could kill us and decided not to. The mosquito kills more of us than every predator combined because it is too small to fight. The fire was the most dangerous force in our world until we picked it up and it rebuilt our bodies. And now the wolf, which was our great enemy for 100,000 years, is asleep on the sofa. Not one of those stories is about us being strong. Every single one is about what happens at the edge of the firelight, where two species decide what they are going to be to each other. And here's the twist. We usually tell this as a story about how the mighty wolf was reduced, softened, and shrunk into a pet. Look at the numbers again. 300,000 wolves clinging on in protected forests. 1 billion dogs on every continent, in our houses, in our beds, fed by an entire civilization that organizes itself to keep them alive. The wolves who stayed proud and wild are barely hanging on. The ones who came to the fire and begged inherited the earth. That was not a defeat. That is the single most successful decision any large predator has ever made. And there is a harder version of that thought, which is that the same trick worked on us. We are the ape that got calmer, that tolerated strangers, that could live packed together in numbers no other primate manages without violence. Several researchers argue we domesticated ourselves the same way, by the same slow filter, and that our own faces got rounder and our own brows got lighter as a result. If they are right, then the wolf did not become like us. Both of us were being shaped by exactly the same rule. So the next time your dog does that thing where it hears you come home and completely loses control of itself, remember what you are actually looking at. That is a wolf. Underneath all of it, that is a predator built to run down animals in a frozen forest, and it has been rebuilt over tens of thousands of years into something whose whole reason for existing is to be pleased to see you. Somewhere back there, one frightened animal moved 4 steps closer to a fire instead of running, and every dog that has ever lived came from that moment. Tell me your team, wolf chose or we chose, and tell me what your dog has got: floppy ears, curly tail, white patch. If you made it this far, hit like and subscribe, because there is one more animal in this story, and it makes no sense at all. It walked into our settlements entirely on its own, exactly like the wolf did. It took our food and our shelter and our warmth for 10,000 years. And unlike the wolf, it changed almost nothing about itself. It never learned to obey, and it can still walk back out into the wild tomorrow and survive perfectly well. Why did the cat never become a dog? That is the next video. I will see you there. Take a slow breath in. Right now, quietly, without even thinking, you are pulling air into a pair of lungs that took evolution hundreds of millions of years to build. They are delicate. They are precious. They are the single thing standing between you and death at every second of your life. And here is the strange part. You belong to the only animal on this entire planet that will, on purpose, fill those lungs with smoke. Not by accident, not caught in a wildfire. On purpose. We are the creature that looked at the one thing every other animal runs screaming from: fire, and the choking gray cloud that rises off it, and somewhere, somehow, decided to breathe it in. Think about how bizarre that really is. We share this planet with millions of species, and not a single other one does this. No animal seeks out fire and pulls its smoke into its own body for the feeling. Cats do not. Dolphins, as clever as they are, do not. Chimps, who share almost all of our DNA, run from smoke like everything else. Only us. Somewhere in our long story, one line of frightened apes crossed a threshold no other creature ever has, and started treating the most dangerous thing in nature as something to invite inside. That single strange habit is what we are here to explain. Every other living thing treats smoke as a warning. It means danger. It means run. A deer smells smoke and flees. A bird feels it and flies away. An oldest alarm in life itself. And then there is us, sitting calmly in the middle of it, pulling it deep into our chests, and somehow feeling something close to peace. So when did that begin? When did a frightened, fire-fearing ape become the animal that breathes the smoke on purpose? The answer is older than you would ever guess. Older than tobacco. Older than farming. Older, in a way, than our species even being fully human. And to understand it, we have to throw out almost everything you think the word smoking means. Because the real story does not start with a pipe or a plant or a habit. It starts with the single most important thing our ancestors ever touched. It starts with fire. There are several layers to this, and each one is stranger and a little darker than the last. So let us peel them back, one at a time. Let us go. Start with a fact that quietly rewrites the whole question. In a sense, humans have been breathing smoke for around 1 million years. Deep in a cave in southern Africa, researchers found the burnt remains of ancient fires, along with scorched bone and ash sealed in layers roughly 1 million years old. Our ancestors, walking that landscape long before we looked like us, were already sitting beside flames. And think about what a fire actually is when you live inside it. Not a fireplace with a chimney, not a stove. A fire in the mouth of a cave, or in the center of a low shelter with no way for the smoke to escape except to hang there, in the air, in your eyes, in your throat, in your lungs, every night, for your entire life, from the day you were born to the day you died. There was no escaping it. This was not an occasional campfire on a weekend. This was the constant, unavoidable, life-giving center of every single day, and its smoke was simply part of the air you were born breathing. A child in that world drew its very first breath in a haze of wood smoke and drew its last one the same way. Fire and its smoke were not a danger you sometimes met. They were the weather inside your home, every hour for 100,000 generations, and your body quietly kept a record of every single lungful. So the truth is almost funny. Long before anyone lit a plant to feel something, our ancestors were already smokers. Not by choice, by simply existing near the thing that kept them alive. Fire gave them warmth. It gave them cooked food. It scared off predators in the dark. It was the greatest gift our species was ever handed, and it came with a price, breathed in, lungful after lungful, generation after generation. And we know they paid that price because we can still see it. When scientists examine the preserved bodies of ancient people, mummies, frozen bodies, remains pulled from bogs and ice, they find something grim inside. The lungs are stained, blackened. Coated in fine soot and carbon, the exact signature of a lifetime spent breathing wood smoke in a closed space. The famous Iceman found frozen in the Alps, thousands of years old, had it. His lungs were dark with the smoke of countless fires. That condition even has a name today, and the haunting thing is this. A modern doctor, looking at those ancient lungs, would recognize the damage instantly, because it looks almost identical to the lungs of someone who spent their life breathing smoke in our own world. Different fire, different century, same black stain. We have been paying the smoke tax for a very, very long time. That condition even has a proper name, anthracosis, the slow blackening of the lungs by inhaled soot and carbon, and it is astonishingly common in ancient remains. Study preserved bodies from almost anywhere people lived indoors with fire, from frozen mountains to dry deserts to the peat bogs of the north, and again the lungs tell the very same story. Men, women, children, all of them carrying the dark residue of a life lived in smoke. It was simply the background condition of being human. To be alive was to be warm. To be warm was to breathe smoke. And to breathe smoke for a whole lifetime was to slowly stain the very thing that was keeping you alive. But this is only passive smoke. Fire you sit beside. The real mystery, the one that makes us truly strange, is not about smoke we simply endured. It is about the day a human being, for the first time, chose to breathe smoke in. Deliberately. Because they wanted what it did to them. And to reach that moment, something had to change. Someone had to notice that the smoke was not just a price. Sometimes it was a doorway. Here is how it probably happened, and it is beautifully simple. Imagine a fire, tens of thousands of years ago. Someone tosses on whatever is nearby to keep it burning. Dry brush, leaves, roots, handfuls of whatever the land gives. And one night, someone throws on the wrong plant. Or maybe the right one. And the smoke that curls up is different. It smells strange. And as they breathe it, sitting close, something shifts behind their eyes. The world tilts just slightly. A feeling arrives that they have never had before, and did not summon, and cannot explain. Put yourself in that moment. You have no science, no word for chemistry, no concept of a drug. You only know that the fire, the thing you already half worship, has just reached into your mind and moved something. To you, that is not a plant. That is not smoke. That is magic. That is a spirit. That is the fire speaking directly to you. And you are going to want to understand it. You are going to do it again. And this is the turning point in the entire story. Because from here on, smoke stops being only something we suffered and starts becoming something we sought. A tool, a medicine, a key, a way to touch a world you otherwise could not reach. The smoke had been in our lungs for 1,000,000 years. Now, for the first time, it was in our intentions. And notice how enormous that shift really is. For 1,000,000 years, smoke was something that happened to us. A side effect, a cost of survival we simply absorbed. But the moment a human chose to breathe a particular smoke, to feel a particular thing, we crossed over, from victims of the fire into partners with it. We began to experiment, to select, to remember which plant did what. In a sense, this was one of the first pieces of chemistry our species ever performed, thousands of years before we had any word for it, worked out entirely by feel, around a fire, in the dark. But why does breathing smoke do anything to the mind at all? Here is the quiet genius of it, and our ancestors stumbled onto it by pure accident. Your lungs are not just bellows. They are one of the most efficient doorways into your bloodstream that your entire body owns. A vast, thin, endlessly folded surface built to move things into your blood in seconds. Swallow a plant and it takes an age to work, filtered and broken down along the way. But burn that same plant and breathe it, and whatever it carries slips almost instantly through your lungs and races to your brain in a single heartbeat. Fire did not just release the plant's hidden power, it handed our ancestors the fastest possible way to feel it. They had found a shortcut straight to the mind without ever knowing the door was there. So how far back does that go? For a long time, the honest answer from science was, not that far. The oldest hard proof of people using a smoking plant seemed to sit only a few thousand years in the past. Pipes, residue, burnt seeds, a scattering of evidence that felt almost recent compared to fire itself. And then, not long ago, the timeline broke wide open. In a stretch of ancient mudflats in the American West, in what is now a bleak desert, archaeologists uncovered the remains of a tiny fireplace left by people at the very end of the Ice Age. And tucked in the ash, they found something they did not expect: charred seeds of a wild tobacco plant. Burnt, handled, brought there on purpose. And the age of that little hearth? Around 12,000 years old. 12,000 years. Let that number sit for a second. That is thousands of years before farming took hold in that part of the world. Thousands of years before pottery, before villages, before almost anything we picture when we imagine early settled life. Hunter-gatherers, following the herds across a cold and open land, were already carrying tobacco to their fires. The habit is not a footnote of modern history. It reaches back nearly to the Ice Age itself. Now, science is careful here, and so am I. Finding burnt tobacco seeds in an ancient fire does not prove, beyond all doubt, exactly how they used it. Maybe they smoked it. Maybe they chewed it and the seeds ended up in the flames. The point is not one perfect answer. The point is that our relationship with these powerful plants is staggeringly, almost unbelievably old. Far older than we ever assumed. And once you start looking, you find these plants woven through the ancient world everywhere, in every direction, on every inhabited continent. Because here is the pattern that should stop you cold. All around the globe, separated by whole oceans, by tens of thousands of years, by peoples who never met and never could have, humans kept discovering the same idea over and over, on their own. In the Americas, tobacco. In Asia, another plant. In Africa and beyond, aromatic resins. The specific plants changed with the land. The impulse never did, which tells us something profound. This was not one invention that spread from one clever place. This was something humans reach for again and again, wherever they are, as if it is written into us. Give a person a fire and a world full of plants in enough time, and eventually, somewhere, someone will lean into the smoke on purpose. It seems to be part of who we are. Nowhere did this go deeper than the Americas. Tobacco there was not a casual pleasure. It was one of the most sacred plants on 2 entire continents, and far stronger than the mild versions most of the world knows today. Shamans used it in doses that would floor an ordinary person, precisely to be knocked loose from the everyday world and thrown into visions. And tobacco was only the beginning. Across South America, people ground seeds and bark into potent snuffs and blew them, forcefully, straight up one another's noses through hollow bird bone tubes. They brewed and burned dozens of visionary plants, mapping out the invisible world with a care and precision that still stuns researchers today. To these cultures, the smoke and the snuff were never recreation. They were sacred technology, tools for talking to gods, healing the sick, and seeing what could not otherwise be seen. So let us talk about that other plant, the one from the mountains, because the evidence there is some of the most vivid we have ever found. High up in a cold mountain range in Central Asia, archaeologists opened a series of ancient graves, roughly 2,500 years old. And inside, resting with the dead, they found wooden braziers, little containers for burning things. Charred, blackened, waiting. And when they analyzed the burnt residue trapped inside those braziers, they found the chemical fingerprint of cannabis. Not just any cannabis either. It carried unusually high levels of the compound that alters the mind, higher than what typically grows wild, which hints at something remarkable. These people may have been seeking out, or even encouraging, the stronger plants on purpose. They knew what they were doing. They wanted the effect. And picture the scene those braziers describe. A funeral, high in the freezing mountains, 2,500 years ago. Mourners gathered in the cold around the dead. Hot stones. The braziers lit, thick, potent smoke rising into the thin mountain air, filling the space, filling their lungs, blurring the terrible line between the living and the ones they had just lost. This was not a casual habit. This was smoke as a bridge to the dead, smoke as prayer, and that is the thread that runs through almost all of it, across the whole ancient world. Smoking, for most of human history, was not about pleasure the way we might think of it now. It was sacred. It was serious. The smoke went up, and people believed it carried something with it, a message, a prayer, an offering, up to whatever they imagined was watching from above. You breathed the smoke to change your mind, yes, but you burned it to reach the sky. Think about how much sense that makes to an ancient mind. What does smoke do? It rises, it leaves the ground, leaves the world of solid things, and vanishes upward into the heavens where the gods and the ancestors were thought to live. If you wanted to send something to that world, gratitude, grief, a plea, what better messenger than the one substance that visibly, obviously travels there on its own? Fire consumed the offering. Smoke carried it home. And it was not always about altering the mind at all. Sometimes the smoke itself was the whole point. Across the ancient world, from the great temples of Egypt to the altars of the Near East, people burned precious resins, frankincense, myrrh, fragrant woods, purely so the sweet smoke could rise. These resins were so valued they were traded like gold, carried thousands of miles across deserts by caravan, and burned in staggering quantities to please the gods and to honor the dead. Walk into an ancient temple and the air itself was thick with sacred smoke, curling around the statues, filling the darkness, carrying the prayers of an entire civilization upward toward the heavens. The person burned it, the god received it, and the smoke was the language spoken between them. Even now, in temples and churches all around the world, that exact ritual quietly continues. So the shaman, the healer, the priest, the person who could handle the sacred smoke, became one of the most powerful people in the group. They held the key to the doorway. They could breathe the smoke, fall into a trance, and return claiming to have walked among spirits and come back with answers. Whether or not you believe a single word of it, imagine the authority that gave them. Smoke did not just alter minds, it built the ladder that some humans climbed to become leaders. And there was one more thing the smoke did, maybe the most human thing of all. It brought people together. Because smoking was so often a shared act, passed from hand to hand, breathed in a circle around a single fire. In the Americas, the ceremonial pipe became sacred precisely because it was shared, passed between people to seal an agreement, to welcome a stranger, to make peace between enemies. To smoke together was to trust together. The rising smoke bound a circle of people into something briefly larger than themselves, watched, they believed, by the spirits above. Long before we had contracts, or courtrooms, or written law, we had a fire, a plant, and a circle of people breathing the same sacred smoke. And somehow, that was enough to hold a promise together. And here's where the whole story turns back on itself and gets a little heartbreaking. Because that same smoke, the sacred one, the one that carried prayers and crowned shamans and comforted the grieving, was quietly doing to their lungs exactly what the cooking fire always had. Blackening them, scarring them. Every deliberate breath of it added to the same ancient debt our species has been paying since the first fire was ever lit. They almost certainly did not know the full cost. They could not see the damage building silently, breath by breath, inside their own chests. All they knew was that the smoke gave them something extraordinary: warmth, visions, medicine, a line to the dead, a feeling nothing else could give. And so, like us, they kept breathing it, because the gift felt worth the price, even a price they could not fully see. And that right there is the oldest bargain our species has ever made. It is not really about tobacco or any single plant. It runs so much deeper. From the very first fire, we struck a deal. We took the smoke into our bodies, first to survive, then to heal, then to pray, then simply because we could not stop, and in exchange, we quietly paid with our lungs. 1,000,000 years of warmth and wonder breathed in. 1,000,000 years of soot and shadow, the cost. And what is almost unbearable to sit with is that we never really renegotiated it. The plants changed, the rituals faded, the reasons dressed themselves up in 1,000 new disguises across the centuries. But the shape of the trade stayed exactly the same. Draw the smoke in, receive the feeling, and quietly hand over a little more of the one thing you cannot replace. Our ancestors made that bargain in firelight without ever fully understanding its terms. And the strangest, most sobering truth of all is that deep down, most of us are still making the very same deal today. So when did ancient humans start smoking? The honest answer is that there is no single, clean beginning. There is a long, layered story, and each layer reaches back further than the one before. Passive wood smoke, 1,000,000 years. Tobacco at the fire, 12,000 years. Sacred plants in graves, 2,500 years. And all across the ancient world, again and again, wherever there was fire and there were plants, humans leaned into the smoke on purpose. Not one invention. A slow, stubborn, worldwide pull toward the smoke, driven by survival, by wonder, by grief, by the deep human hunger to feel something more and to reach something higher. Every one of those reasons is ancient. And every one of them is still with us. Because here's the part that should give you a small chill. That impulse never left. The specific reasons drifted and changed over the centuries, but the ancient shape of the thing survived almost perfectly intact. The fire that was once sacred is mostly gone. The prayers are mostly gone. But the human being, sitting quietly, breathing in the smoke on purpose, feeling something shift and paying for it slowly with their own lungs, that person is still here. That person has always been here, and the fire is still at the center of it, even when there is no fire at all. Because what our ancestors were really chasing, from that very first accidental breath, was never the smoke itself. It was what the smoke did. A feeling, an escape, a moment of something other than ordinary life. That hunger is one of the oldest things about us, older than any language, older than any god we ever named. And that is why it is so hard to explain, and so hard to stop. You are not fighting a modern invention or a recent bad idea. You are up against one of the deepest grooves ever worn into the human mind, cut by a million years of firelight, and then reinforced by prayer, by grief, by ceremony, by the simple animal comfort of the warm smoke and the feeling it brings. It is not a weakness in a few unlucky people. It is a very old shape in all of us, one that fire pressed into our species long, long before any of us were ever born. So the next time you see it, smoke rising, someone breathing it in, that quiet, faraway look on their face, remember what you are really looking at. You are not looking at a modern habit. You are looking at one of the oldest ceremonies on Earth, worn down and stripped of its meaning, but still, somehow, being performed. A person, and a fire, and the ancient, dangerous, irresistible cloud between them. We are the animal that made friends with fire. And then slowly, over a million years, we discovered we could never quite stop breathing it in. That is not a small thing. It is one of the strangest, most human stories there is, written quietly in the dark of every ancient pair of lungs that ever pulled the smoke a little deeper. You were never just breathing. You never were. Line up every large animal on Earth and race them, and you will lose to almost all of them. A cheetah hits its top speed in about 3 seconds, and that speed is roughly 4 times yours. A horse would leave you standing. A greyhound, an antelope, a bear, an elk, even a squirrel over a short sprint would embarrass you. Your own house cat, that soft, lazy thing asleep on your sofa, is faster than you off the mark. By the raw numbers, a human being is one of the slowest large mammals on the entire planet. Slow legs, no claws, no fangs, weak jaws, thin skin. On paper you are prey, and yet, give me one thing. Give me time. Give me a hot afternoon and a horizon to walk toward, and I will run down that horse. I will run down that antelope. I will follow it and follow it and follow it until it lies down in the dust and cannot get up. And it is not just me. It is you. It is every single person watching this, whether you know it or not. Because the slowest big animal on Earth is also the one that nothing, given enough time, can ever truly escape. Sit with how strange that is, because it breaks the rule that runs the entire animal kingdom. In nature, speed is survival. The fast eat, and the slow get eaten. So how did the slow, soft, clawless ape end up as the one animal that a deer genuinely cannot outrun? How did being slow become the deadliest hunting strategy in the history of life on land? Because the answer is not that we are secretly fast. We are not. The answer is far stranger than that. It is written into your sweat, your skin, your breath, the exact shape of your backside, and a set of springs hidden in your legs that you have never once thanked. And by the end of this, the way you look at your own body, this thing you probably think is weak is going to completely change. This goes deep. Let's go. But first, be honest with me down in the comments because I actually want to know, what is the longest distance you have ever covered on your own 2 feet in one go? Not on a bike, not in a car. Walking or running. A marathon, a long hike up a mountain, a single miserable lap of a track in school that made you want to lie down and die? Drop the number below, just the number. Because by the halfway point of this video, you are going to realize that number is a lot bigger than nature ever intended a soft little primate to manage, and there is a very deep reason why. To understand the trick, you first have to understand your enemy, and your enemy is heat. Every muscle in your body is a tiny engine, and like every engine, when it burns fuel to make movement, most of that energy comes out not as motion but as heat. A sprinting animal is not just building speed, it is building fire inside itself. And here is the iron law that governs every hunt on Earth. An animal cannot keep running once its body gets too hot. Overheat the engine and it seizes. The muscles fail, the brain cooks. The animal has to stop, lie down, and dump that heat before it dies. So the real question of the hunt was never who is fastest. The real question, the one that decides who eats and who starves, is who can get rid of heat the longest. And on that single question, The human body is not just good. It is the undisputed champion of the entire animal kingdom. Nothing else even comes close. Start with the thing you are probably a little ashamed of. Sweat. We treat sweat as an embarrassment, something to hide, to mask, to spray over. But your ability to sweat is arguably the single greatest survival superpower any animal has ever evolved, and almost nothing else on the planet can do it the way you do. You have somewhere between 2 and 4 million sweat glands spread across your skin. When you heat up, they open and they push water out onto the surface of your body. And as that water evaporates, it carries the heat away with it, cooling the blood just underneath. You are, quite literally, a self-misting radiator. You cool yourself from the outside of your entire body at once, continuously, while still moving at full effort. Now compare that to the animal you are hunting. A dog cannot do this. A dog has almost no sweat glands on its body, so it cools down by panting, hanging its tongue out and breathing fast to evaporate moisture from its mouth and airways. That works, but here's the catch that changes everything. A dog cannot pant and gallop at the same time. When a four-legged animal runs at full speed, its guts slam back and forth against its lungs like a piston with every single stride, and that motion forces its breathing to lock into rhythm with its footfalls. One stride, one breath. It physically cannot take the fast, shallow, cooling breaths of a pant while it is running flat out, so it has a brutal choice: run and overheat, or stop and cool. It cannot do both. A horse sweats a little, which is why horses are better at endurance than most. But even a horse overheats and has to stop long before you would. You have no such limit. You breathe however you like, in any rhythm you like, because you run upright on 2 legs and your breathing is completely unhooked from your stride. You can sprint and cool at the exact same time. Your prey cannot. That single difference is a death sentence, played out in slow motion over hours. And this is where an ancient, almost magical hunting method comes in, one that our ancestors used for hundreds of thousands of years, and that a few groups of people on Earth still use today. It is called persistence hunting. The idea is beautifully, terrifyingly simple. You do not catch the animal. You do not need to. You just refuse to let it rest. You find a large animal, an antelope, a kudu, a wild horse in the heat of the day, and you start to move it. It bolts. Of course it bolts. In 10 seconds it is a speck on the horizon and you look ridiculous, jogging after it at a pace it beat in a heartbeat. But that animal just did something you did not. It sprinted and it dumped a massive load of heat into a body that cannot easily shed it. So it stops in the shade to pant and cool down. And just as it starts to recover, you appear again, walking, jogging, calm. And it has to run again before it has finished cooling. And again, and again. Each time it burns a fire it cannot put out. Each time it starts its sprint a little hotter than the last, a little more exhausted, a little more desperate. And you are just sweating. You are just breathing. You are eating a little food, sipping a little water, and walking in a straight line under the sun that is slowly cooking your dinner alive. After 2 hours, sometimes 3, sometimes 5, the animal's body temperature climbs past the point of no return. Its muscles stop responding. It goes into a kind of collapse called hyperthermia, and it simply lies down, unable to rise, not because you were faster, but because you would not stop. That is how the slowest animal on the plain kills the fastest. Not with a burst, with a sentence: "I will still be coming when you can no longer run." Let me put you inside one of these hunts, because reading the theory does not do it justice. It is the hottest part of a savanna afternoon. You are barefoot. You carry almost nothing. A little water, a light spear you may never even throw. You pick your animal, a big kudu, healthy, fast, and you start it moving. It explodes away and is gone, and for a moment you feel the old absurdity of it, a slow, soft ape chasing a rocket. But you do not chase the rocket, you chase the tracks. You settle into a rhythm your body could hold until nightfall, and you read the ground like a page. A turned pebble, a broken stem, the direction of a panicked hoof. You find the animal again in the shade, still blowing hard, and the instant it sees you, it must run before it is ready. An hour passes. Its sprints get shorter. Its stops get longer. Foam gathers at its mouth. Its head begins to droop. 2 hours. It is staggering now, weaving, its own body heat cooking it from the inside while yours pours off your skin as harmless mist. And then it simply stops. It stands there shaking, unable to take another step, looking at the slowest predator on the plain, the one it beat by a mile in the first 10 seconds, and it is lost, not to teeth, not to speed, to time. If that just rewired something in your head about what your body actually is, do me one small favor and hit subscribe, because the next part is where it gets genuinely unbelievable. We have talked about the cooling, but cooling only lets you keep going. It does not explain how you move so efficiently for so long on so little fuel. And that story is hidden inside your legs, your feet, and one strange feature on your body that scientists argue is the single clearest fingerprint of a born endurance runner. Stay with me. Let's talk about the springs in your legs, because you are carrying a set of them and you have probably never noticed. Run the sole of your foot along the arch and feel that curve. That arch is not just there to give you flat feet or fallen ones to complain about. It is a spring. Every time your foot slams into the ground, that arch flattens slightly and stores the impact as elastic energy, then snaps back and returns a chunk of that energy to push you into your next step. You are getting free forward motion, energy you did not have to spend, handed back to you on every stride. And behind your ankle sits the big one, the Achilles tendon. In a walking animal, it is short and does little. In you, it is long, thick, and powerful, and it works like a loaded catapult, stretching as you land and firing you forward as you lift off. Chimps, our closest relatives, have almost no Achilles tendon at all. We have a magnificent one. Nobody builds a catapult like that by accident. Evolution built it because for a very long time, running long was the difference between eating and dying. Now feel the back of your body. Reach around if you like and appreciate the largest muscle you own, the gluteus maximus, your backside. We joke about it, we sit on it all day, but that muscle is enormous compared to any other apes. And here's the strange part. When you walk slowly, it barely switches on. You do not really need it to stroll. But the moment you run, it fires hard on every stride. Its main job during running is to stop your upper body from pitching forward and face planting into the dirt each time your foot lands. It is a stabilizer built specifically for running, which means evolution grew you a giant muscle, the biggest in your body, that is mostly there for one purpose: to let you run without falling on your face. You do not grow a muscle that big for something you rarely do. You grow it for something you did constantly, for something your survival depended on. And it keeps going, because once you start looking, your whole body is a machine tuned for one thing. Deep in your inner ear, there are 3 tiny loops called the semicircular canals that sense the movement of your head and keep your gaze steady. In humans, one set of these canals is noticeably enlarged compared to our walking ancestors. And enlarged canals mean sharper balance during fast, bouncing, jarring motion. Exactly the kind your head takes when you run. Your ability to keep your eyes locked on a target while your whole skeleton is pounding up and down is written into the bone of your skull. Then there is your head itself, held high and balanced neatly on top of your spine instead of slung out front like a 4-legged animal's. There is a small ridge on the back of the human skull, a place where a special ligament anchors that helps hold your head steady as you run. Our closest ancient relatives who mostly walked did not have it. The runners did. Even the fact that we are mostly hairless, naked skin, where nearly every other mammal has a thick fur coat, points the same way. Fur traps heat. Bare skin sheds it. We shed our fur so we could shed our heat, so we could run under the open sun when every sensible predator was lying in the shade. Piece by piece, from your inner ear to your bare arms to your enormous backside, you are not a failed sprinter. You are a purpose-built distance machine. Quick gut check before we go on, because I am curious where you land. When you picture the ultimate athlete, the peak of physical performance, what comes to mind? A sprinter exploding out of the blocks? A weightlifter? A fighter? Because here's the uncomfortable truth this video is circling. By the standards of raw nature, the greatest thing the human body ever did was not lift or punch or sprint. It was endure. It was keep going long after everything else had to stop. Do you buy that? Or do you think speed and power still win? Tell me below. I genuinely want to see the split. Now let's put a real face on this, because persistence hunting is not some prehistoric fairy tale we pieced together from old bones. People still do it. In the Kalahari Desert in southern Africa, groups of sand hunters have been documented chasing down antelope like kudu across the open sand in the blistering midday heat. A scientist named Louis Liebenberg spent years running alongside them, and what he described is exactly the pattern. The hunt takes place in the hottest part of the day, on purpose, because heat is the weapon. The hunter picks an animal and drives it into a run, then tracks it across ground where it has vanished from sight, reading bent grass, a scuffed stone, a single hoofprint in sand, predicting where a panicked animal will go. For hours, the man is not faster than the kudu, not stronger than the kudu. He is simply more relentless than the kudu's ability to cool itself down. And at the end, the animal stands trembling, overheated, finished, and the hunter walks up to a creature he could never have caught in a straight sprint in 1,000 years. And these hunts are long. We are talking distances of 15, 20, sometimes over 30 kilometers in a single go, across burning sand, in temperatures that would put most people in hospital. Think about what that requires. Not just cooling, not just spring-loaded legs. It requires a body that can run for hours on a tiny trickle of fuel without falling apart. And this is the other half of the miracle. A sprinter burns through their energy in seconds and is done. Your body, at a steady endurance pace, is astonishingly economical. You store fuel as fat, and even a lean person carries enough fat to walk and jog for a very, very long way. You can eat while you move. You can drink while you move. You can, unlike almost any other animal, top up the tank without stopping the engine. The antelope cannot graze while being chased. It runs on what it has, and what it has runs out. You bring a packed lunch to the hunt. There is a beautiful idea in science called the endurance running hypothesis, put forward most famously by two researchers, Daniel Lieberman of Harvard and Dennis Bramble, and their argument is bold. They say that running, specifically long-distance running, is not just something humans happen to be able to do. They argue it is one of the central forces that made us human in the first place, that around 2 million years ago, as our ancestors started to include more meat in their diet, the ability to run prey into the ground and to jog long distances to reach a carcass before the other scavengers put a massive survival premium on endurance. And so, generation after generation, the bodies that could run far and shed heat and spring off their tendons survived and had children, and the bodies that could not, did not. Our anatomy did not just allow running. According to this idea, running carved our anatomy. Now, I promised you honesty in this channel, so let's be fair, because science is an argument, not a scripture, and not everyone agrees. Some researchers push back on the endurance running hypothesis. They point out that many of these traits, the long legs, the sweat glands, could also have evolved simply for efficient long-distance walking, for covering huge territories on foot to gather food, rather than specifically for running down prey. Walking, they argue, is cheap and constant, and might explain the same features without the dramatic chase. Others question how common persistence hunting really was, versus being one tool among many. It is a genuine ongoing debate. But notice something. Even the critics agree on the core of it. Whether it was running or relentless walking, the human body was shaped by covering enormous distances on two legs over long stretches of time in a way that no other great ape comes close to. The disagreement is about the exact method. Nobody disagrees that endurance in some form is stamped into your bones. So which is it in your gut? Were we born to run, actively chasing animals to death across the savannah? Or born to walk, quietly covering vast ground to outlast the world at a gentler pace? Team run or team walk? Pick a side and defend it in the comments, because both camps have real scientists and real evidence, and I want to see which way this room leans. The best argument I read, I am pinning to the top. Here is something that should genuinely unsettle you in the best way. This ability did not go anywhere. You still have all of it. Every feature we have talked about, the sweat glands, the Achilles tendon, the arches, the giant glutes, the balanced head, the bare skin, you are carrying the complete kit right now, in a chair, reading this. The modern world simply stopped asking you to use it. We invented the wheel, then the engine, then the sofa, and the greatest endurance machine evolution ever produced started ordering food to its door. But the machine is not gone, it is idling. And this is why when an ordinary person, an accountant, a student, a retiree decides to train and then runs an entire marathon, 42 kilometers on their own 2 feet, we call it an extraordinary achievement. And it is. But it is also just a human being briefly switching the engine back on and doing the exact thing the engine was built, over 2 million years, to do. Think about the events we consider the absolute limit of human madness. The ultramarathons, 100, 200 kilometers without sleep. People running across entire deserts. People running for 24 hours straight. We treat these athletes as freaks of nature, as biological outliers. They are not outliers. They are demonstrations. They are showing you in extreme form the standard equipment that every healthy human quietly carries. There is a famous race in Wales that pits humans against horses over roughly 35 kilometers of rough country. For years, the horses won, as you would expect. But horses do win. Humans are not faster. And yet, more than once, on a hot enough day over that distance, a human being has crossed the line first. A man beat a horse. Because over the right distance, in the right heat, that was always going to be possible. That was the whole point of you. Now go back to the very beginning, to that image of you losing every sprint to every animal in the lineup. The house cat beating you off the mark. Feeling slow, feeling soft, feeling like prey. And hold it next to what you now know. that the deer only wins the first 10 seconds, that after that, the clock, the sun, and the heat all quietly switch to your side, that the cheetah is a firework, brilliant and over in moments, while you are a slow-burning fire that does not go out. The whole animal kingdom is built for the sprint. You were built for the story that comes after the sprint, the long, patient, merciless hours where speed means nothing and only endurance decides who is still standing. And there is something almost philosophical buried in this, if you let yourself see it. Nature had two strategies on the table: be explosive or be relentless, be the flash or be the tide. Almost every animal chose the flash, overwhelming speed and power in a short, decisive burst. Your ancestors, the strange upright apes who could not win any of that, were pushed onto the only path left, not the sprint, but the refusal to stop. And it turns out that was the more powerful choice all along. The animal that cannot be shaken off, the one that keeps appearing over the ridge, calm, sweating, still coming, long after you were sure you had lost it. That patience, that refusal to quit, is not a metaphor we invented to feel better about ourselves. It is written into your tendons and your sweat glands. It is the literal, biological reason your species is here. So the next time you feel slow, the next time you feel weak, the next time some faster, stronger, flashier thing leaves you standing and you feel like the loser of the race, I want you to remember what you actually are. You are not the cheetah. You were never supposed to be the cheetah. You are the thing the cheetah cannot escape. You are the walker who arrives after the runner has collapsed. You are 2 million years of hot afternoons and endless horizons and ancestors who simply would not lie down, the slowest large animal on Earth, and the one that, given enough time, nothing has ever been able to outrun. Because here's the final thought I want to leave you with, and it is the one that gives me chills every time. Every human being alive today, all 8 billion of us, is descended from the ones who did not quit the chase. Somewhere back down your family line, past all the cities and the farms and the fire, there is an ancestor jogging across a hot plain, eyes fixed on an animal that thought it had escaped. And it did not escape. If that ancestor had given up, had lain down in the shade, had accepted being slow as being finished, you would not exist. Not one person watching this would. You are here because when it counted most, your line kept going. That is not just history. That is your inheritance. And it is still in your legs. So do something with that this week, even something tiny. Go for a walk that is longer than you meant to. Feel the machine wake up. Feel the ground come back off your arches. Feel your breath find its own rhythm. Feel the oldest engine in the human story turn over one more time. It is still yours. It always was. And genuinely tell me in the comments, did you already know your body was built like this? Or did this completely flip how you see yourself? I read as many as I can, and the story that hits me hardest, the person who tells me about the longest, hardest thing their own 2 legs ever carried them through, I am pinning that comment to the top of this video, because that is the whole point. Not that we are fast, that we do not stop. If any part of this made you look down at your own legs a little differently, do me a favor. Hit that like button. It genuinely helps this reach other people who have spent their whole lives thinking they were the slow ones. Subscribe, because I have got a whole series of these coming. Every one about the hidden machinery inside the animal you see in the mirror, and go switch your engine on. It has been waiting 2 million years for you to remember it is there.